page and in Google Classroom. So let's start with the introduction to hyperbola, its parts, and how to graph a hyperbola.
As an introduction to hyperbola, we will discuss first with its definition, and then we will describe or we will recognize the equation and the important characteristics of hyperbola. So like an ellipse, a hyperbola has two foci and two vertices. Yung itsura niya katulad siya ng parabola, yun nga lang meron siyang dalawang parabolas and then with opposite openings of the graphs. So based on the definition of hyperbola, we already defined hyperbola when we had an introduction to conic sections. So based on its definition, it is a set of all points P in a plane such that the difference of its distances from two fixed points called the foci is constant. So anong ibig sabihin nun? So malamang madaling basahin pero kung i-check natin sa graph para mas maintindihan, halimbawa ayan ang hyperbola. Ito ang foci, focus number 1. So f sub 1, f sub 2.
So again, foci is the plural of focus. Since we are talking about hyperbola, we have two foci. So we have focus 1 and focus 2. So they are foci.
And then ito yung point 1. Halimbawa, so ang gagamitin natin ay foci at isang point dito sa hyperbola. Halimbawa daw, yung distance from P sub 1 to focus 1, P sub 1 to focus 1, bawasan natin ng distance from point 1 to focus 1, P1 to focus 2. Halimbawa ito ay 8 at ito ay 6. So kung ito ay 8 at ito ay 6, so ang difference niya ay 2. And then gamit tayo ng another point na naandito sa hyperbola. Halimbawa ito. So yung point, pag ito naman yung ginamit natin ng point, for example this is point 2 or P sub 2, yung distance from P sub 2 hanggang F sub 1 at yung bawasan natin ng distance from point 2 hanggang F2, point 2 hanggang F2, halimbawa ito ay 6 at ito naman ay 4. So ang distance niya ay 6 P sub 2 to F sub 1, and then yung P sub 2 to F sub 2 ay 4. So pag binawasan natin, so that is 2. So yung constant, ibig sabihin yung difference nun kahit saan part ng hyperbola is the same.
So that is the definition of a hyperbola. Kasi kung pag binasa lang natin yung meaning nun, pag sinabi lang natin na based on the definition na given kanina, hindi natin siya maintindihan. Pero dito sa example, at least pinakita kung ano ba yung sinasabing difference na yun. Based dun sa graph, kahit saan ka maglagay ng point, dun sa part ng hyperbola, meron lang silang common difference. Kahit sabihin na dun ka sa kabilang part ng hyperbola, maglagay ng point, yung distance ng yung longer distance minus the shorter distance, meron lang silang iisang difference.
Pag nagfo-form ng parabola, inuuna natin yung vertices. Halimbawa, ganyan yung itsura ng hyperbola. So, automatic, ito yung vertices, nasa y-axis siya. Yung distance from vertex 1 hanggang vertex 2 or yung line segment na na-form from vertex 1 to vertex 2, that is called transverse axis. So that is called transverse axis. Kung ang transverse axis ay nasa y-axis, so that is horizontal.
So ayan, sa part na yan, baka medyo maguluhan kayo. So if the transverse axis lies in y-axis, therefore that is a vertical transverse axis. Or kahit hindi siya mag-lie doon sa y-axis, as long as it is parallel to y-axis, that is still a vertical transverse axis. So dito sa video, that is one of the corrections. So ngayon, hindi rin masyado ma-explain, pero so yan, from vertex 1 to vertex 2, so naka-form tayo ng straight vertical line. Kaya tinatawag na vertical transverse axis. Pero paano kung yung parabola open sideward? Halimbawa na andito siya. So it means yung mafo-form na line is horizontal. So that is a horizontal transverse axis. So i-correct din naman siya dito sa video mamaya. Baka lang maguluhan kayo.
Transverse axis.
So ayan, yung part na yan, buburahin din naman siya mamaya. So paki-disregard na lang.
Vertical pala. Bakit horizontal? So that's vertical transverse axis. So yung vertex or vertices so makikita siya commonly dito sa center ng graph ng hyperbola. Kung dito sa part, ito yung highest point. Kung dito naman sa part na to, this is the lowest point of the graph. So that is these are the vertices, V sub 1 and V sub 2. Vertical transverse axis, if we connect the two vertices, so that is a transverse axis. Kasi nasa y-axis siya. Paano kung wala siya sa y-axis? Pwede rin, basta parallel siya dito sa y-axis. Halimbawa, ang graph nyo ay medyo pangit lang. Naandyan. Ito halimbawa yung vertex 1 o vertex 2. As long as horizontal siya or parallel siya dito sa y-axis, that's still a vertical transverse axis. So it can be in the y-axis or parallel to y-axis. So sa hyperbola, we have vertical transverse axis and we also have horizontal horizontal transverse axis. So vertical transverse axis, vertices, vertical transverse axis, vertices, and horizontal transverse axis. Sa horizontal transverse axis, ibig sabihin, if we connect the two vertices, yung line segment na mapo-form ay nasa x-axis. So halimbawa, ito yung vertices. Medyo pangit lang pero pagtyagaan na. So these are the vertices. Yung line segment na mapo-form if we connect vertex 1 to vertex 2 na andito naman ngayon sa x-axis. So it means that is horizontal transverse axis, yung line segment na to. Next. So aside from the line segment na makikita dito sa horizontal.
So yung first graph natin kanina yung pinakita ko, that is an example of vertical transverse axis because the graph opens up and down. But in this example, the given graph opens sideward, opens to the left and to the right. So it means the line segment that form is horizontal. So that is a horizontal transverse axis.
Sa x-axis, pwede rin siyang wala dito sa mismong x-axis as long as parallel siya dito sa x-axis na makikita natin. So given the graph of a para-hyperbola, we can form a diagonal line. Pero hindi siya mag-i-intersect I think dito sa graph natin. So yung diagonal line na yan, i-discuss ko kung paano siya ma-form sa ibang video. Pero pag nakakita kayo ng diagonal line, so that is the asymptote. So meron tayong equation ng asymptote pero nasa ibang discussion siya. So focus lang muna tayo dito sa parts para malaman natin sa given graph alin ang vertices, asan ang vertical transverse axis or horizontal transverse axis, nasaan ang asymptote, nasaan ang foci, ang conjugate. So yung mga yon. So we're done with vertical and horizontal transverse axis. Ito yon. Sa vertical yung pa ganun. Vertices, ito. And then asymptote, yung diagonal line. Next, if these are the vertices sa loob ng graph, merong points na tinatawag. So these are the foci. So f sub 1, f sub 2. Yung ginamit natin kanina, that is the focus. Pero yung distance between the vertex and the focus dito sa isang side, equal din siya sa distance ng vertex to another focus dito naman sa kabilang side. Kung ito ay 1, ang 1 unit ang distance nila, automatic 1 unit din ang distance dito sa kabila. So that is the foci. Kung paano natin malalaman kung saan ilalagay ang foci, so ayun, meron din siyang another video kasi meron siyang computation. Next, vertices, vertex 1, vertex 2, if we connect, so that is horizontal transverse axis, asymptote, foci. Next is if we draw a line parallel to y-axis, pero tatama siya dito sa foci, ang tawag dyan is latus rectum. So that is latus
Latus rectum without S. Pero nasa video naman siya sa caption yung correction. So dito sa video, cancel nyo yung S. So that is latus rectum. That is also present to ellipse. So sa ellipse, we also have latus rectum.
rectum. So parallel siya dito sa y-axis or perpendicular siya dito sa horizontal transverse axis. So meron tayong latus rectum dito. Ito rin. Meron din siyang latus rectum dito. Hindi ko alam kung plural na yung latus rectum or meron siyang term na pang singular. So automatic, kung same lang sila ng parabola, same lang ang distance or ang length ng latus rectum sa right at sa left. So that is the latus rectum. Vertices, if we connect, horizontal transverse axis, focus or foci, asymptote, latus rectum. So yung formula sa pagkuha ng latus rectum, ng foci, ng asymptote, so nasa ibang video yun. So meron pa tayong tinatawag na conjugate. Ito naman yung line segment. So, pati dito sa conjugate, malalaman natin kung paano. So halimbawa, these are the endpoints of the conjugate. Ito yung horizontal transverse axis. So pag nanguha tayo ng line segment na perpendicular dito sa horizontal transverse axis, yung line segment nito, ito yung tinatawag na conjugate. Conjugate. So ito yung endpoints ng conjugate. Meron ding computation kung paano kinukuha ang endpoints ng conjugate. And then endpoint siya pag pinag-connect natin, that is the conjugate. Ngayon yung intersection ng horizontal transverse axis at ng conjugate, that is the center. So these are the parts of the graph of a hyperbola. Vertices, horizontal transverse axis. Kung patas siya is vertical transverse axis. Foci, focus 1, focus 2. Asymptote, yung diagonal. Conjugate, center. Meron pa ba? And the latus rectum. So these are the parts of a graph of a hyperbola.
So in the parts of hyperbola, so we can easily identify this if we already solve from other form to its standard form. So in hyperbola, we also have the standard form in terms of its axis. It can be a vertical axis, vertical transverse axis, or horizontal transverse axis. So we have two different standard form for vertical and horizontal. So in our example, for the first graph, that is a vertical transverse axis. But for the second graph, so that is a horizontal transverse axis. So the difference is if we connect the two vertices and the line form is horizontal, then that is a horizontal transverse axis. But if the line form is a vertical line, so that is a vertical transverse axis. So how can we identify the vertices? So we will solve it on the second video. And then for the asymptote, so that is a diagonal line or diagonal lines that form in the graph. Pero since that is an asymptote, it means it will not intersect any part of the graph. So akala nyo lang palapit siya ng palapit pero hindi siya mag-i-intersect. So the foci, ayan, inside the graph of each side. And then the latus rectum. So the center of the latus rectum should be the focus. So for example, dito sa right hand side, so we have the latus rectum, the center should be the focus. And then for the second latus rectum, so the center should be the focus for F sub 2, the second focus natin. And then they have the same distance from the vertex to F sub 2, that is equal to the vertex to F sub 1. And then for the conjugate axis, so dito kasi hindi na sabi na that is an axis, that is also an axis. For the conjugate axis, that is parallel to, perpendicular to the transverse axis. So if we find the center of, or the intersection of the conjugate axis and the transverse axis, so that would be the center. So these are the parts of the hyperbola na kailangan hanapin nyo or isolve nyo sa susunod na video. Pero madali lang naman siya. Yung pinaka mahirap na part lang is the computation. First, you have to compute, and then madali na yung sa pagkuha ng mga parts, yung mga coordinates, and how are you going to plot the graph of a hyperbola given an equation.
Last meeting, we discussed the different parts of a hyperbola in terms of its graph. So today, di-discuss naman natin yung how to compute or how to find the coordinates of the center, the vertices, the foci, how to compute the length of the latus rectum, the length of the conjugate axis, and its coordinates of the endpoints, and then how to find the equation of the asymptotes and how to compute the eccentricity. So we're talking about hyperbola.
So in this video, ayan, so we have the parts of a hyperbola. So we will focus on horizontal transverse axis because we have different standard form for vertical transverse axis. So for the center, that is HK, vertices, and H plus minus A, and then K to find the coordinates of the vertices. For the foci, that is H plus minus C, K, for the coordinates of the foci. To find the length of the latus rectum, that is 2B squared over A. And then for the length of the conjugate axis, that is 2B. And then to identify the equation of the asymptotes, that is y is equal to plus minus B over A multiplied by X. And then for the eccentricity, that is C over A. So as you can see, these are, you are going to use H. You're going to find the value of H, K, C. So yung mga yun, A and B, which is already present if we already translate the given equation to its standard form. Kasi sa standard form, makikita natin dyan si H, si K, si A, si B. Ang wala lang is si C. Okay, so ulit natin si C. So dito, ayun, computation and then parts and then graph.
Start with horizontal transverse axis. So last meeting, diniscuss naman kung ano yung pinagkaiba ng horizontal transverse axis and vertical transverse axis. So ngayon, since we are only talking about horizontal transverse axis, ito yung gagamitin natin. So nakasulat naman yun sa board. Pero kung gagawin natin siyang vertical transverse axis, may pagkakaiba sa pagkuha ng mga yan. So for the center sa horizontal transverse axis, that is the H and the K. And then for the standard form pala muna, for horizontal transverse axis, we will use quantity x minus h square all over a square minus y minus k square all over b square equals 1. So this will be this is the standard form of horizontal transverse axis ng hyperbola. Yun, baligtad pala. Hyperbola with horizontal transverse axis. So dito makikita natin yung value ni A, value ni B, pero wala si C. So for the C, so we will use square root of A square plus B square para makita natin yung value ng C. Kasi gagamitin natin mamaya si C dito sa ibang parts niya. So for the center, that is HK. So makikita nyo naman sa standard form yung H and K. For vertices, that is H plus A, H plus minus A. So we have H and then A and then K. And then for the foci, H plus minus C. So yon. Kaya kailangan natin si C para malaman natin yung vertices, yung coordinates ng foci. And then for the length of the lattice rectum, we will use 2b square over A. And then for the length of the conjugate axis, that is 2b. And then for the equation of the asymptotes, that is y is equal to plus minus b over a raised to x. And for eccentricity, that is e is equal to.
So for the asymptotes, correction din to. So that is y is equal to positive, negative. Y is equal to plus minus b over a multiplied by x. That is not a raised to x.
C over A. So gagamitin din natin si C dito kay eccentricity. So we will start with transforming an equation to standard form. So ibig sabihin, kailangan mapunta siya sa ganitong form. For the first example, we have so given this equation, kailangan natin siyang i-transform sa ganitong format. So 9x squared equal minus 4y squared minus 36 equals 0. So una nating papansinin, yung standard form na naka-equate sa 1. Pero ito, naka-equate siya sa 0. So una nating gagawin is ita-transpose si negative 36 or minus 36 sa kabilang side ng equal sign using APE. Addition property of equality. So magiging 9x squared minus 4y squared equals positive 36 na ngayon siya. And then para maging 1 siya, kailangan nating i-divide kasi ano may ginagawa, halimbawa 2. So para maging 1 siya, i-divide natin by itself, which is 2, kaya maging 1. Halimbawa the given number is 5. Para maging 1 siya, i-divide natin by itself or 5. So para maging 1. Kaya si 36, naka-equate tayo ngayon kay 36. para maging 1 siya, i-equate or i-divide natin siya by itself, which is 36. Yun nga lang, since equation to, so to make the equation balance, lahat ng terms dito sa kabilang side or sa left hand side, kailangan din nating i-divide by 36. So mapapansin nyo, parang ganito na yung form niya. Pero kailangan pa nating i-simplify. So for 9x squared over 36, if we simplify, that is x squared over 4. And then minus yung 4y squared naman over 36. Ay, 4y squared. Tama. So that is y squared over 9. And then 36 over 36 is equal to 1.
Question sa part na yan? Okay. Okay, so none so far.
So kung mapapansin nyo, nasa ganitong form na siya. Question, bakit x square lang to instead of x minus h square? Or y square lang, bakit hindi y minus k square? So pwede natin kasi itong i-expand as x minus 0 square. So ganun din yung kakalabasan yan. At yung y minus k, bakit nasa loob to? Yung y minus k, pwede natin sabihin na ito, yung y.
Medyo i-rewind ko lang sa part na to para at least ma-gets.
Parang ganito na yung form niya. Pero kailangan pa nating i-simplify. So for 9x squared over 36, if we simplify, that is x squared over 4. And then minus yung 4y squared naman over 36. Ay, 4y squared. Tama. So that is y squared over 9. And then 36 over 36 is equal to 1. So kung mapapansin nyo, nasa ganitong form na siya. Question, bakit x square lang to instead of x minus h square? Or y square lang, bakit hindi y minus k square? So pwede natin kasi itong i-expand as x minus 0 square. So ganun din yung kakalabasan yan. At yung y minus k, bakit nasa loob to? Yung y minus k, pwede natin sabihin na ito, yung y minus 0 square. So it means the value of h is 0 and the value of k is also 0. So since 0 siya, hindi na natin inilagay. So this is already the standard form.
If the value of h is 0 and the value of k is 0, it means the origin is, or the center of the graph is located at the center. So we have the Cartesian plane, the x and y, so it means the center can be found at the origin. So in this given, we started with a simple equation, and then we translated this equation to our standard form, or the standard form of hyperbola with horizontal transverse axis. So x squared over 4 minus y squared over 9 is equal to 1. So this is already in standard form. H and k is not visible, but we can identify h as 0, k as 0, a as 2, and b as 3. And then the equation is already equated to 1.
So what is the value of A? So let's start with the value of A. So 4 ang nasa ibaba natin. Since square to, ito hindi naka-square. So that is square root of 4. So A is equal to 2. And then B is square root of 9. So that is equal to 3. For C, pinakita ko kanina, that is square root of A square plus B square. So that is square root of, hindi ko na isusulit yung formula. So A natin is 2, B natin is 3, at C natin ay, C is equal to square root of A square plus B square. So that is square root of A natin is 2 square, B natin is 3 square. Square root of 4 plus 9, square root of 13. So C is equal to square root of 13. So for the center, that is HK. Ang H natin kanina, sabi ko nga is 0. At ang K natin is 0. So ibig sabihin, sige, mamaya natin i-graph pag kailangan na. So center natin is, for the center, that is H and K. Hindi ito yung C natin dito, iba yon. So ang center natin is HK. Ang H natin is 0, ang K natin is 0. Next, vertices. V na lang, wala naman siyang kaparehas na. For the vertices, that is H plus minus A and K. So ano ba yung H natin? So kanina sabi natin H is 0, plus minus ang A natin is 2, ang K natin is 0. So paghihiwalayin lang natin, 0 plus 2 is 2, and then the other one is 0. Yung isa naman ay negative 2 and 0. So ito ngayon yung vertices natin. So vertices is 2, 0 and negative 2, 0.
Question sa part na yan? So to find the vertices or the coordinates of the vertices, so we will use H plus minus A and then K. So since we have two operations here, H plus minus A, paghihiwalayin lang natin yon. So yung H natin is 0, so magiging plus 2. Kaya dito, positive 2 siya, pero since positive siya, hindi naman natin inilalagay. For H minus A, that is 0 minus 2, so that is negative 2. So for the vertices, since that is a hyperbola, so automatic meron tayong dalawang vertices. Kaya dito we have 2, 0 and negative 2, 0.
Next, foci, F na lang. So for foci, gagamitin natin ay H plus minus C and then another K. So ang H natin is 0, plus minus, ang C natin ay square root of 13. Ang K natin is 0. So pag pinaghiwalay natin to, itong plus minus, magiging positive square root of 13, 0. And then yung isa naman ay negative square root of 13, 0. So ang foci niya ay square root of 13, 0. And negative square root of 13, 0.
So same with the vertices, we have two foci. Kaya nga siya foci kasi plural. It means there are two focus. So for the first focus, we have positive square root of 13 and 0. So the coordinates is square root of 13, 0. And then the other one is negative square root of 13 of and 0. So same ano lang, process lang with vertices.
Next, Lattice Rectum. Length of the Lattice Rectum. So that is 2b square over a. 2, ang b natin ay 3 square, ang a natin is 2. So that is 3 multiplied by 3, 9. Cancel na lang pala natin to. 3 multiplied by 3 is 9. So ang Lattice Rectum natin is 9. Ibig sabihin yung length ng Lattice Rectum natin ay 9.
Question sa Lattice Rectum. So for the Lattice Rectum, again, we're just going to use 2b squared over a. So we have the value of a and b. So we'll just substitute and then we cancel 2 and then ayun. So the remaining is 3 squared, which is 9.
And then for the conjugate axis, para makuha natin yan, gagamitin lang natin length of the conjugate axis is 2b. So that is 2. Ano ba yung b natin? 3. So 6. So conjugate axis, ang length niya ay 6. Napakadali lang. Mukhang mahirap lang yung mga terms, pero napakadali lang niyang kunin. Next, equation of the asymptote. So that is y equals, so y equals positive minus plus minus b over ax. So y equals plus minus, ang b natin is 3, ang a natin is 2x. So sabihin that is y plus minus 3 halves x. So that is the, walang equal pala, y equals plus minus square root 3 over 2x. And then eccentricity, yun na lang. So that is, so nakuha na natin yung square root of a square plus b square. So ayun kasi numerator, and that is c. And then for the denominator, that is a. So it means eccentricity is square root of 13 over, ang a natin ay 2. So ayan, A, B, C, center, vertices, foci, Lattice Rectum, conjugate axis, asymptote, and eccentricity. So pag
Sir, nakamit po kayo.
So from the given equation, that is 9x squared minus 4y squared minus 36 equals 0. So we translated it to its standard form of a hyperbola with horizontal transverse axis. So ang naging sagot natin is x squared over 4 minus y squared over 9 equals 1. So this is already in standard form. And then from the standard form, we identified h and k, a, b, and c. So for c, we had a computation. That is the Pythagorean theorem, and then we got the square root of 13 as the value of c. And then for the center, that is just hk. So the coordinate of the center is 0, 0. It means the graph is located at the origin of the Cartesian plane. And then for the vertices, again, we just use the formula, and then we got the coordinates of the vertices as 2, 0 and negative 2, 0. For the foci, again, we also use the same method, but we have different number to substitute. So that is square root of 13, 0 and negative square root of 13, 0. And then for the Lattice Rectum, we just perform the operation, and then the length is 9. For the Conjugate Axis, again, that is 6. And then for the equation of the asymptote, that is y is equal to positive negative 3 halves x. And then for the eccentricity, that is square root of 13 over 2. So kung i-check nyo, parang napakahirap na mga terminologies, parang kakaiba, hindi napaka-common. Kasi parang mabasa mo pa lang yung Lattice Rectum, yung Conjugate Axis, Asymptote, Centricity, Foci. So yung mga yun pa lang, kung babasahin mo lang siya, parang hindi mo siya agad maiintindihan. Pero kung i-check mo from the beginning of the video, kung talagang papanoorin mo siya from the start, so maiintindihan mo siya kung gaano kadali or paano kunin yung mga parts na ito. Ngayon, paano kung nag-skip ka? Paano kung sinimulan mo sa gitna? So automatic, hindi mo talaga siya maiintindihan. So ayun yung requirement ni mathematics. So sa mathematics, kailangan mo yung mga prerequisite topics. So hindi mo masosolve yung mga higher level math if you don't understand the basic. Okay, kaya ayun yung kakaibahan niya sa ibang subjects. Kaya marami ang may hate sa mathematics, tama? So ayun. And then first part is we transform the given to standard form. Second is we identify the parts of the hyperbola. And then the third part is we're going to graph and we're going to locate each part.
Ginirap natin to, mag-start tayo sa center. So ito yung graph, y-axis and x-axis. Ang center niya ay 0. Ang vertices niya ay 2, 0, 1, 2, negative 1, negative 2. So ito yung vertices. Magawa tayo ng yan. Pero nakadepende pa to sa Lattice Rectum.
Sir, nakamit po ulit kayo.
Hirap na ito. Okay, so para ma-check nyo kung tama ba yung gawa nyo, since we are in horizontal transverse axis, dito pa lang sa vertices, ma-identify nyo na yan. So siyempre, if you connect the vertices, ang line na ma-form should be a horizontal line.
Ang foci natin ay square root of 13, 0, isang positive at isang negative. Ang square root of 13, estimated siya is 3.61. So 1, 2, pagpalagay natin na ito yung 3, 3.5. So ito yung foci. Dito naman, ito isa negative, ito isa positive, 1, 2, 3, 3.5, ito. So focus ay ito. Focus 1, focus 2. Foci. Focus, foci. For the Lattice Rectum, ang length niya ay 9. So ibig sabihin, ito ay 4.5 and another 4.5. 4.5 and another 4.5. Basta ang length nito ng Lattice Rectum ay 9.
So for the latus rectum, since ayun nga, the focus should be the center of the latus rectum, it means it cuts the latus rectum into two equal parts. So since we computed the length of the latus rectum, which is 9, so i-divide lang natin to by 2. Kaya nasabi ko na from the point of the hyperbola to focus 1 is 4.5. Kasi nga, if you add 4.5 plus 4.5, that is 9. So yung total length niya is 9.
Conjugate axis, so 6. Pero ang center ay nasa 0. So kung perpendicular siya dito sa transverse axis, horizontal transverse axis, center niya ay 0. So magmo-move tayo ng 1, 2, 3 at negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. Pag pinagsama niyo yan, ang total length niya ay 6. So ito yung endpoints ng conjugate axis. 3, negative 3. Sabihin, for the coordinates of the conjugate axis, that is 0, 3 and 0, negative 3.
Question sa part na yan. Coordinates of the endpoints of the conjugate axis. So ayun, for the conjugate axis, ayan, since we computed the length of the conjugate axis, which is 6, so mag-start tayo sa center. So syempre, kung ang length ng conjugate, yung center should be the center, or the center cuts the conjugate axis into two equal parts. So kung horizontal transverse axis yan, and then we're going to create a line segment, or we're going to plot the conjugate axis, that should be perpendicular to the transverse axis. So aside from perpendicular, transverse axis should cut the conjugate axis into two equal parts. So from 0, nag-move tayo ng 3 units upward and 3 units downward. Kapag pinag-combine natin, that is 6 units. Kaya ang length talaga ng conjugate axis is 6 units. Pero since we stop at 3 dito sa y-axis, ang coordinate niya sa taas is 0, 3 and sa baba is 0, negative 3. So wala naman sigurong problema sa inyo sa plotting, no?
So that is for the conjugate axis. So meron tayong conjugate axis, endpoints of the conjugate axis, vertices. So gawa tayo ng square using endpoints of the conjugate axis and the vertices. So yung edge niya or yung corner, diagonally gawa tayo ng line and then another one dito sa kabilang side.
Sir, nakamute po ulit.
Lagi ko nakalimutan. Or kasing naka-stay na unmute, baka kung ano yung marinig nyo eh. Okay, so for the equation of the asymptote, ang requirement natin dito ay vertices. So kailangan nakatapat tayo or gagawa tayo ng straight line na tatamaan yung vertices. So ito yun, pinapakita ko sa arrow. And then, saan siya mag-e-end? Matapat naman siya ngayon ng endpoint ng conjugate axis. Ito yung conjugate axis natin, di ba? O yung endpoint ng conjugate axis natin sa taas. So gawa rin tayo ng straight line, straight horizontal line. So ngayon, merong intersection yan. Conjugate endpoint of the conjugate axis. So pag gumawa ka ng straight line, tatamaan niyo yung straight line dito sa vertical line naman na tumama sa vertex. So yung magiging corner niya, ito, sa part na to. Same with dito sa baba. So we have the endpoint of the conjugate axis dito sa baba. Pag nag-draw tayo ng straight line, tatama siya sa vertical lines na tumatama dito sa vertices. So yung endpoints niya, so ayan yung mga magiging corner nung rectangle. So hindi siya square. Yung rectangle na mapo-form. So ngayon yung endpoints, halimbawa dito sa una, so if we connect or we draw a broken line from the first corner, upper right, to the corner, lower left, ayan. So that would be the asymptote. So kung i-graph nyo siya, kung talagang gagamit kayo ng graphing na application, halimbawa sa GeoGebra, ayun, makikita nyo na parang palapit siya ng palapit dito sa hyperbola natin. Kaya lang, ayun, it will never intersect the graph. So that is asymptote. So same with the other corners. So combine or draw a straight broken line from the corner dito sa lower right up to the corner sa upper left. So yung line na yan, that is another equation. Kaya nga dito we have positive, negative. So that is the another equation of the asymptote.
So yung diagonal, that is the asymptote. Ang equation niya ay ito. Y is equal to, since nasa positive side tayo, 3 halves x. Ito naman is y equals negative 3 halves x. So these are the parts and the graph of a hyperbola with horizontal transverse axis.
So ayan. Question. So first example natin, hyperbola with horizontal transverse axis. So yun, posted naman to yun. Kung sakaling may makalimutan kayo once na magbigay na ako ng activity, so pwede nyo naman siyang mabalikan kung paano nakuha. Kasi napakarami niyan. So siguro kung sakaling pagawin ko kayo ng activity, hindi nyo siya masosolve ka agad nang hindi babalikan yung discussion natin. Okay. Next.
So for the Lattice Rectum, that is this is the second example of transforming an equation of a hyperbola to standard form with horizontal transverse axis. So last video or sa first video, so we identify the parts and how to compute or to identify the coordinates of the points. So dito, ito, naka-retain pa rin yung standard form natin ng hyperbola with horizontal transverse axis. So given this equation, kailangan natin siyang i-transform into this form or sa standard form. So again, ang ginagawa natin is kailangan yung equation ay ma-equate sa 1. Kaya ang gagawin natin, si constant term, ililipat natin sa kabilang side ulit. Kasi si constant ay nasa right hand side. So ngayon dito sa left hand side, pagsamahin na natin yung may magkaparehas na variable. So si x square, saka si 8x, pagsamahin na natin, and then minus si y square, ilagay natin sa loob ng parenthesis, yung negative ay ilabas natin, and then si y square, ilagay natin sa loob ng parenthesis, pero positive na siya. And then yung another y magiging negative naman, so from positive naging negative, kasi inilabas natin si negative sign. So naging positive si y, naging negative si 2y. And then, so si positive 40 magiging negative 14. And then using the perfect square method,
Ayan, sa part na yan may question kayo kung paano siya naging, kasi dito we have minus y square. Kasi di ba pinag-group natin yung mga x terms and y terms. So for the x terms, we don't have problem with groupings kasi they are both positive. So for the x terms, we have x squared plus 8x as one group. But for the y terms, we have, since that is minus y squared, so that is negative y squared and positive 2y. So ang ginawa ko is inilabas ko si minus. Kasi dito sa standard form, kung makikita nyo, we use minus or subtraction. Tama? So kailangan, ang maging operation natin for both groups should be subtraction. Kaya inilabas ko na si minus. Kaya lang sa loob ng groups ni y terms, we have positive y squared. And then, instead of positive 2y, we have negative 2y. May question sa part na to or naguguluhan? Para at least habang tayo, online discussion. Kasi pag pinanood nyo lang siya sa video, tulad yan, di ba? Wala naman mag-explain in case na may question kayo. Tapos, ayun, kapag offline, doon papanoorin, tapos saka magtatanong sa akin. Mas maganda kapag online conference, ayun, doon na rin kayo nagtatanong para at least walang mag-sacrifice din ng time during offline activity. Maliwanag sa part na to? Sige daw, now stop kung wala naman. Pero kung gustong magtanong at medyo nahihiya, ayun, pwede naman kayong mag-direct message. Hindi naman ako nagbabanggit ng pangalan. Okay, wala naman
Completing the square method, ito, gagawin natin siyang x square.
So ayan, may nagtanong. Palagi pong may iba ang sign kapag naglipat. Kung ang tinutukoy mo ay ito, yung constant term natin na plus 14 dito sa left hand side. Yes po. Kapag nilipat nyo sa kabilang sign ng equal sign. Kasi usually ay yung ginagawa natin. That is APE, the formal method. Pero yung common na ginagamit natin is transposition. So we have plus 14. So kapag ililipat mo siya ng kabilang side, so lagi siyang nagbabago. From positive magiging negative, and then kung negative naman siya dito, magiging positive naman siya sa kabilang side ng equal sign. Yun ba yun? Sa nagtanong? Okay.
Plus 8x plus 8 divided by 2 is 4 square, 16. Minus y square minus 2y, negative 2 divided by 2, negative 1 square is positive 1. Equals negative 14.
Diyan sa part na yan, so nagkaroon siya ng 16 dito. So completing the square method from after grouping the x and y terms, so we have x squared plus 8x. And then ang gagawin natin is same method with the first conic sections we discussed. So we are using completing the square method. So ang ginagawa lang natin for completing the square method, we just copy the first two terms, yung x squared plus 8x. And then we have to identify the term. The third term, ano yung ginagawa natin nun? I-divide natin by 2. For example, ito yung coefficient niya is 8. So we're going to divide it by 2, which is 4. And then ini-square natin yung quotient. So 4 squared is 16. Kaya meron tayo dito ngayong plus 16. And then for the other group, which is the y terms, the coefficient of the second term is negative 2. So yung negative 2, i-divide natin by positive 2, that is negative 1. And then negative 1 square, that is positive 1. So that is completing the square method to make each group a perfect square trinomial. So ayan, na-equate niya dito sa negative 14. And then, ayun, baka hindi natin sundan yung sa susunod na video. Ang susunod dito is, since we added 16 and 1 dito, pero minus 1 kasi siya kasi minus tayo dito. So same thing lang rin or same number lang din ang gagawin natin sa right hand side to make the equation balance pa din. So since that is an equation.
So nag-add tayo dito ng 16, so plus 16. Nag-add tayo dito ng 1, pero dahil negative minus siya dito sa labas ng parenthesis, so that is minus 1. And then we just simplify sa ganitong format. So x, gawa lang ilabas natin si 2. For 8 divided by 2, so 4, so x plus 4. And then minus y, labas natin si 2. Negative 2 divided by 2, negative 1. Negative 2 divided by positive 2 is negative 1. And then equals negative 14 plus 16 minus 1 is 1. So,
Question sa part na yan. So group x terms and y terms, and then complete the square of each group, and then get the factors or factor the given perfect square trinomial. So ang ginagawa lang natin dito is, ayun, we just copy x without exponent 2, and then we just divide the coefficient of the second term. So dito we have 8, so we just divide it by 2. Kaya we have x plus 4. And then nilabas natin si exponent 2 sa labas ng parenthesis. Same thing with the second group. So we just copy y without exponent 2. And then we divide negative 2 by 2. So laging ganun ang gagawin nyo, divide by 2. So negative 2 divided by 2, that is negative 1. So we have the second term as negative 1 or minus 1. And then we put the exponent 2 outside the parenthesis or outside the group. And then for the expression dito sa right hand side, we just simplify negative 14 plus 16 and negative 1. So that is positive 1.
So hindi na tayo magdi-divide ngayon kasi automatic 1 na itong nasa labas natin. So kung mapapansin nyo, nasa ganong form na siya. Yun nga lang, wala siyang denominator naman ngayon. Nung una walang h saka k. So ngayon walang a saka b. Pero halimbawa meron tayong given na 2. That is whole number. Pero meron siyang denominator pag transform natin sa fraction form, which is 1. Same with 5. That is 5 over 1. So same lang rin siya dito. Ibig sabihin, pwede tayong may denominator dito na 1 at 1. Pero since 1 siya, ganyan na yung magiging equation niya. So this is already in standard form. So let's identify first A. So ang A natin is 1. Ang B is, denominator is 1. Ang C natin is, again, for C.
So yun, baka magkaroon ulit ng confusion sa 1 na yan. Since naka-square to, kahit naman sabihin mo na square root of 1, that is still 1. Ne? So since ang A natin is 1, if we get the square root of 1, that is still 1. Same with B.
That is square root of A square plus B square. So 1 plus 1, so that is square root of 2. Tama ba? So C is square root of 2. Next, center. So for the center, that is H and K. So ang H natin is negative 4. Ang K natin is positive 1. Kanina walang example yun.
Ayan, sa given natin ngayon, kanina sa first example, the value of H and K are both 0. Pero this time, ang value ni H is negative 4 and positive 1 naman si K. So same lang rin ang gagawin nyo. Kung plus 4 siya dito, so ginagawa nyo lang siyang minus 4. Kapag minus 1 naman siya dito, gagawin nyo lang siyang positive. So, ganun. Pero syempre, as STEM student, dapat alam nyo yung talagang process kung paano siya nakukuha. Bakit kailangan baguhin yung sign. Kasi ang talagang expression natin is x minus h. Here we have x plus 4. So it means the value of h should be negative 4. And then for the y, so the standard or the correct expression is y minus k, but here we have y minus 1. So the value of k should be positive 1.
yun, pero ang ginagawa natin, same with other conic sections. Kung x plus 4 siya, ang h, so ang ginagawa natin ay, dito sa coordinates, x, so ang ginagawa natin ay, ang h natin ay from positive, ginagawa natin negative 4. And then sa k, kung negative siya, ginagawa natin positive. Next, vertices. So, sa vertices, again, gumagamit tayo ng h plus minus a and then k. Ang h natin ay, ito pala, h is negative 4 plus minus, ang a natin is 1 and then k. So pag pinaghiwalay natin to, that is negative 4 plus 1. Ano yung k natin? 1. And yung isa naman ay negative 4 minus 1. Ang k natin is 1. So that is negative 4 plus 1, negative 3, 1. Ito, negative 4, negative 1, negative 5, 1. So ito ngayon yung vertices. Negative 3 and 1. And then the other one is negative 5 and 1. For foci, so that is h plus minus c and then k. So ang h natin ay negative 4 plus minus c is square root of 2k. Paghiwalay natin, negative 4 plus square root of 2. Ang k natin is 1. And then negative 4 minus square root of 2, 1. So, since hindi naman natin siya masisimplify, pwede lang natin siyang i-rearrange as square root of 2 minus 4. Yung isa naman ay negative square root of 2 minus 4. And then 1, 1. So, kahit alin dyan sa dalawa.
Ayan, so kanina, ang value ng h natin is 0 and k is also 0. Kaya puro 0 lang yon. So this time, meron tayong value ng h and k, kaya nagkaroon tayo ng computation. So talagang i-perform mo na yung h plus c and h minus c.
So, negative 4 plus square root of 2, 1. Pero kung ita-transform nyo siya sa decimal, so pwede naman. And then yung isang foci ay negative 4 minus square root of 2, 1. Mamaya ita-transform naman natin yun sa decimal. Next, Lattice Rectum. So for the Lattice Rectum, that is 2b square over a. So that is 2. Ang b natin is 1 square. Ang a natin is 1. So that is 1, 1, 1. 2. Next, length of the conjugate axis. Conjugate axis. Yun. CA na nga lang. LR for Lattice Rectum is 2. Conjugate axis. So CA is for conjugate axis. For CA or conjugate axis, so that is 2B. 2. Ano ba yung B natin? 1. So that is 2. So conjugate axis is 2 din. And then asymptotes. Equation of the asymptotes. So that is y equals positive negative b over a x. Y equals positive, negative, b over a. So 1x, or y equals positive, negative, x. So that would be the asymptote. Y is equal to positive, negative, x. Next, eccentricity for E. So that is C over A. Ang C natin is square root of 2 over, ang A natin is 1. So just square root of 2. So i-graph naman natin ngayon. So ang center natin ay negative 4, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 1. So ito yung pinaka-center. Vertices natin ay negative 3. 1, 2, 3. And then positive 1. Ito. And then yung isa ay 1, 2, 3, 4. Negative 5. 1. So ito ngayon yung vertices. Horizontal transverse axis tayo kaya open sideward siya. Ayan.
So sa part na yan, dapat ma-identify nyo kung tama kayo. Kasi una, you have to plot the center. So dito, ang center natin is negative 4, 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4 sa negative side and then 1. So if this is the center, so kung meron kayong vertices, ayan, so negative 3 and 1. And then negative 5 and 1. So ma-identify nyo pa lang na they have the same distance. No, if you connect, pag kinonect nyo yung mga vertices, ayun nga yung magiging transverse axis natin, horizontal transverse axis. Pero wala siya yung center niya ay wala sa origin ngayon. So unlike the first example, nasa origin yung pinaka-center natin. But still, if the graph is horizontal transverse axis, that is still parallel to the x-axis.
And then, ang foci, so estimatedly, negative 4 plus square root of 2. So that is negative 2, 1, 2, 0.58, 59, 1, 2.51 dito. Yung isa naman ay negative 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So dito naman siya. So yung focus medyo dikit dito sa foci. Yan. Vertices, foci. And then length of the lattice rectum. Ibig sabihin 2 units to. Ay 2 units. Tama, 2 units ang length niya. So center niya ito, so ibig sabihin tig 1 unit. So madali nang ma-identify yan. For the conjugate axis, ito yung horizontal transverse axis natin. So ito ngayon yung conjugate. So since ang conjugate axis is equal to 2, so kung ito yung center, 1 unit sa taas, 1 unit sa baba. So para malaman natin yung endpoint niya, kung ang center ay negative 4, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, automatic, that is negative 4 din, yung isa ay negative 4. Ang y-axis niya ay, kung ito ay 1, 2. Yung isa naman ay, kung ito ay 1, sa baba ay 0. So ito ngayon yung endpoints ng conjugate axis. Endpoints ng conjugate axis. Conjugate axis, axis of transverse axis pala, horizontal transverse axis. Next, pag connect-connectin natin to, pag pinag-connect natin yan, nakaka-form tayo ng diagonal line. Kapag
So, diyan correction, ayun, medyo ang nailagay ko is yung andun sa Lattice Rectum. So, yung vertical line should be doon sa vertices na doon sa Lattice Rectum.
Connect natin yung corners. So, ang equation ng asymptote is y is equal to positive x. Yung isa naman ay y is equal to negative x. eccentricity is equal to square root of 2. So that is hyperbola with horizontal transverse axis, example number 2.
Question. Hyperbola with horizontal transverse axis. Translating to standard form, identifying the parts, and graphing. Ano, kaya pa? So napakarami lang talaga or napakahaba lang talaga ng process niya. Pero hindi naman siya ganoon ka komplikado. Magiging komplikado lang siya kung titignan natin sa ganung view. Kasi hindi natin sinimulan. So kapag dito ka nag-start sa pinakadulo, makikita mo yung nasa whiteboard, napakaraming laman. Tama? Kung diyan ka mag-start, maintindihan mo siya. So, syempre, hindi mo siya maintindihan. Saan magaling yan? Pero kung mag-start ka, iintindihin mo yung pinakauna, so automatic, step by step, malalaman mo na madali lang pala siya. So yun lang yung problema natin sa MART. Kulang lang tayo sa effort. So kailangan lang nating bigyan ng time na simulan kung hindi natin nasimulan. So yun yung mahirap sa atin. Late ka pumasok. So yung mga susunod doon, malamang hindi mo maintindihan kasi hindi mo na-gets yung prerequisite topic or yung mga basic doon sa topic na yon. Question, lagi po bang may graphing? Yes po. Pero ayun, depende sa natin. Para at least alam nyo ring i-graph. Para at least ma-visualize nyo kung bakit ba gano'n yung graph ng hyperbola. Okay, i-rewind sa graphing. Check natin.
A, B, C, 2, 3, 4, negative 5. So, ang center natin ay negative 4, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1. So, ito yung
Center. May problema sa center, plotting the center. That is negative 4, 1. Of course, we will start with the x-axis. So we have the value of x, which is negative 4. So we have negative 4. And then for the y-axis, we have 1. So the intersection of negative 4 and 1 can be found at second quadrant. So andyan yung pinaka-center niya. So wala siya sa origin.
pinaka-center. Vertices natin ay negative 3, 1, 2, 3, and then positive 1. Ito. And then yung isa ay 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 5, 1.
Saan na yun? Question sa plotting the vertices, negative 3 and 1. So center, we have the center. And then for the vertices, first vertex, we have, syempre, x-axis ulit, negative 3, and then 1. And then for the other vertex, we have negative 5, 4, 5, and then 1. So ito yung vertices niya or yung point ng coordinates.
So ito ngayon yung vertices. Horizontal transverse axis tayo kaya open sideward siya. Ayan. And then ang foci, so estimatedly negative 4 plus square root of 2. So that is negative 2, 1, 2, 0.58, 59, 1, 2.51 dito. Yung isa naman ay negative 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So dito naman siya. So yung focus medyo dikit dito sa foci. Yan. Vertices, foci.
Kung medyo hirap kasi nasa radical form siya, halimbawa dito sa foci natin, nasa radical form siya, you can translate the expression to decimal form. para mas madali yung ma-identify kung nasaan ba yung part na yun. So ngayon, hindi naman siya sakto. Mag-estimate lang kayo kung saang part. Katulad yan. So we have the first coordinate of the foci, which is -4 plus square root of 3 and 1. So in-estimate ko lang rin yan kasi hindi siya saktuhan. Pero based dun sa estimation natin, sobrang close niya sa vertex. So andito siya, malapit na malapit siya dito sa vertex. Same with the other focus. Malapit na malapit lang rin siya dito sa vertex 2.
And then length of the latus rectum, ibig sabihin 2 units to. Ay, 2 units. Tama, 2 units ang length niya. So center niya ito, so ibig sabihin tig 1 unit. So madali nang ma-identify yan. For the conjugate axis, ito yung horizontal transverse axis natin. So ito ngayon yung conjugate. So since ang conjugate axis is equal to 2, so kung ito yung center, 1 unit sa taas, 1 unit sa baba. So para malaman natin yung endpoint niya, kung ang center ay -4, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, automatic, that is -4 din, yung isa ay -4. Ang y-axis niya ay, kung ito ay 1, 2. Yung isa naman ay, kung ito ay 1, sa baba ay 0. So ito ngayon yung endpoints ng conjugate axis.
Question sa latus rectum. Ay, bakit wala? Latus rectum, wala namang problema kasi from the foci, so that should be the center of the latus rectum. So we just draw a straight line hanggang dun sa graph. So that would be the endpoint of the latus rectum. And then for the conjugate axis, ayan, so ang length niya is 2. So from the center, so since ang length niya is 2, i-divide natin by 2. So that is 1. Ibig sabihin, 1 unit upward and 1 unit downward. So yung magiging endpoint niya should be this point. Ngayon, i-identify lang natin kung ano ba yung coordinates ng point na to. So dapat familiar kayo doon sa pag-identify ng coordinates kasi basic topic yan sa algebra. So if this is the endpoint, ano ba yung coordinates nito? So nakatapat siya sa -4, that is -4, yung x-axis natin or x-coordinate. Sa y-coordinate naman, so doon siya magbabago since yung endpoint niya dito sa taas nakatapat sa 2. So -4 and 2 yung y-ordinate. And then for the other coordinates, we have same ordinate which is -4. And then for the y-ordinate, we have 0 kasi tumama siya dito sa mismong x-axis. So length of the conjugate axis is 2. Coordinate of the endpoints of the conjugate axis is -4, 2 and -4, 0.
Endpoints ng conjugate axis. Conjugate axis, axis of transverse axis pala, horizontal transverse axis. Next, pag connect-connectin natin to, pag pinag-connect natin yan, kaka-form tayo ng diagonal line. Kapag connect natin yung corners. So ang equation ng asymptote is y is equal to positive x. Yung isa naman ay y is equal to negative x. Eccentricity.
So again lang dito sa part na to sa asymptote, yung vertical line should be the center of the vertical line should be the vertex, hindi the latus rectum. So the vertex or the vertices. So this one, ito sa vertex 2 and then sa vertex 1. And then for the horizontal lines, so kailangan ng center niya should be the endpoints of the conjugate axis. Yan, so straight line sa endpoint, straight line sa endpoint.
Is equal to square root of 2. So that is hyperbola with horizontal transverse axis, example number 2.
Question pa? Time check, 11:47. So busy remaining time. Baka may question pa. Yun. So kung ang question ay naipakita naman sa video, medyo hindi lang siguro na gets, ayun, pwede naman siyang balikan. So aside from the video na pinanood natin, we can also, I will also post the video with explanation sa Google Classroom. Pero syempre posted din naman yun sa page kasi mauubos ang storage ng drive. Question pa? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3,